Hi, hello, and welcome. I am definitely not Vlad, and you're watching me pug my way to 2.8k rating on a Guardian Druid in Season Flight Dragon 2, in Dragonflight Season 2. So in today's episode, we're going to open up my Great Vault and see if it's a Great Vault or a mediocre vault or a really shitty vault. And then, depending on what we get from the vault, I'm going to either run a bunch of EP or just start pushing keys to 20. We'll see what we get. I'm not sure what loot spec I should actually open the vault as. I think there's more trinkets that I would like to get that are feral trinkets or DPS trinkets than there are that I would like to get that are guardian trinkets, but truth be told, the only trinket I really want is the Heart of Thunder, which is a guardian trinket, a tank trinket. I'm not sure. Actually, I'm just gonna open it as guardian. I don't want to think about it too much because then I'll get into analysis paralysis. It'll take forever for me to decide what I'm gonna open it as. So let's open it as guardian and let's see what we get here. And we have a full set of hero gear from the raid slots. But we're probably going to take one of these myth tier slots here. Ooh, actually, this is not ideal, but it is myth tier, and that is a lot of versatility. I have a crafted cloak, so this cloak is a complete, like, just no, we're not going to take that. But this trinket, actually, 2,000 stamina is no joke, and it's a 2-minute cheat death, basically, like a soft-ish cheat death. Let's see what it says. Falling below 50% health activates the defense matrix for 12 seconds, which has a high chance to react to your damage taken, counterattacking or blah fire damage and absorbing the next 75,000 damage you take. So I can proc it multiple times within those 12 seconds to absorb 75,000 damage. That is actually really good. And 2,000 stamina alone is going to make me super tanky. But then again, a bunch of versatility and a myth tier neck. But it is crit versatility and not haste versatility. Ideally, I would get a high haste, low versatility, and that would be perfect. But this isn't looking too bad either. Oh, but this is a myth level trinket. I really want to go for the trinket, but I also could take the tokens of merit, and then I could get myself a socket or a helmet socket, which is a 447, so that's even better to put a socket on. Decisions. I think, man, I really want to get, I'm so committed to actually getting the trinket from, what's it called? Vortex Pinnacle. My brain farted there for a second. That I actually don't want to take this out of pure spite. This is probably the best thing I can get from the vault, from everything that I have here. Okay, so my choices are a small stat increase, like slightly better stats here. Although I would be sacrificing. Actually, no. I'm not going to take this neck. All I'm getting is a little bit of stamina, a little bit more versatility. I'm losing a bunch of haste and gaining crit. Crit is not that important for me. This would be pure tankiness, and I would actually love it. I think that would be really nice. But out of spite, I'm going to go for whatchamacallits. I'm going to go for the trinket from Vortex Pinnacle. So I'm actually, even though this is offered, I'm going to grab these, and I need to click this button immediately, otherwise I'm going to change my mind yet again. And there we go. It's settled. I took the tokens of merit. I took the fucking merits tokens. We're going to get the volcanic sculptor. Taking the sculptor. And I'm putting it on my noggin. There it is. It's over. It's done. It can't be undone. It's over. I've committed to it. It's over. Oh man, I'm getting buyer's remorse. I'm thinking about that trinket, and I really want that trinket now. But oh well. But now it's a sealed deal. We've committed to the bit. We've committed to getting the trinket from Vortex Pinnacle, even if it's the death of me. Oh, also a little thing that I decided to do while I was just a bit bored and didn't feel like any Mythic Plus is I went and I bought myself a Traveler's Thunder Mammoth. So now I can actually repair stuff and sell stuff on the go. Since I did just talk about the trinkets, I think I'm going to go and try and do a bunch of Vortex Pinnacle runs and hopefully get the trinket. I don't know which run this is, but I really hope that it's my last one. No, it's not. Okay, so this was a 13 because I need champion or worm crests. So I did a 13 because the difference between a hero tier and a champion tier trinket is not going to be that big. And another kill. I think this was a 15. Still getting worm quests. Please give me the trinket. God damn it. Come on, trinket. God, how many of these am I going to get today? This is like the third one in the same day. Okay, another run is completed. Getting them worm crests. Not getting them trinkets. You know how it goes. There we go, with a clutch battle res at the end, so everyone's alive for the finish. And of course, no trinket. Oh, that's run number 39 or 40, I'm not actually sure. And jack shit. And this run marks the last time I need to do something that's lower than a 16, because I don't have anything I can upgrade with worm crests anymore. And of course I didn't get the item, so. Alright, that's another 17. That should get us our last actual upgrade that we can get from just using spec crests to upgrade. Of course I'm not getting the trinket. Alrighty, we're running a 17 Vortex Pinnacle on Tyrannical with Volcanic and Sanguine. Right off the gate, I use my Stampeding Roar to to make everyone a little bit faster. I Moonfire one of the enemies, and then I charge the one in the middle. I use a Thrash to make sure that I keep aggro on them as I keep running past them to grab the guys off the bridge. Now you have to do that exactly that way, otherwise you're going to be trying to reach the mobs in the back, and you won't be able to catch up to them. And that kind of ruins the pull and it makes it a lot harder to group them. I decided to stand in the circle that knocks you up because I had survival instincts. I used survival instincts to negate pretty much all of the damage from that and just used my rush thing, whatever the hell it's called, to charge back down. Now there you saw me knock back an enemy so that the Sanguine pool doesn't drop underneath the Mistrals. The Mistrals are a huge pain in the ass on Sanguine because they can chain two really long casts that are uninterruptible one after the other. And basically if they're stuck in a Sanguine pool while doing both of those, they're going to heal up the full. Here somebody taunted off me when the enemy was very low to make them move away from me or towards them, and that helped me not stack Sanguine on top of a Mistral. Here I get yoinked by the Evoker, rescued to the side to keep me moving more quickly. I can appreciate that a little bit. Here I Moonfire the Wild Vortex in the background, and I stand right behind the corner. And if nobody hits the Vortex and gets into combat with it, it will keep walking towards you because you're the only person that it wants to hit with a spell. So it doesn't have anyone in its line of sight, so it's going to keep moving until you are in its line of sight. Here I messed up a little bit and something died in front of the group, and the group started moving towards me. And I decided to knock them back and charge into them so that they stop trying to walk through a Sanguine pool. The rest of the group is doing great, helping me keep everything out of Sanguine pools. They're doing absolutely wonderful. This was such a good run that I decided to show this one and commentate on this one because the group was just kicking ass. We had a monk called Roll God X because, of course, he was doing great. We had a augmentation evoker called Elvax. Did great. Did everything you could expect him to do quite well, including rescuing me, which was sometimes irritating because I don't like being treated like a ragdoll. We had a wonderful Saggy Hoofs XD paladin who I think played a Draenei. I'm not sure. I think they're playing a dwarf, so I don't know why they're called Saggy Hooves, but you know. Anyway, they did wonderful. They even spec'd protection, loot spec to help me get the trinket. And Lunaruka, which was our balance druid, also did wonderful. They also knocked some mobs around every now and again to help me with the Sanguine. But yeah, and that previous pull, that's probably one of the rougher pulls in the whole dungeon, especially on Fortified. We did great. I used my, what's it called, Nature's Vigil back there while I was talking about the group. I did that just to help out with the healing because there's two Gus soldiers and they will charge a random person and put a pretty nasty dot on them, which is a magical effect, so it's a bit hard for the healer to dispel both of those unless it's a priest who can mass the spell. For this group, we're also knocking around enemies. Great use by Roll God X of the Ring of Peace to knock the caster out of the Sanguine pool because I don't think I had an interrupt. I don't think they did either, so they made the call to knock the enemy back. Here, I believe on this pull, I also use what's it called, Nature's Vigil. Ideally, you wouldn't use it here, and you would use it on one of the intermission periods of the boss coming up because there's a lot of AOE damage. But you can't really go wrong using it here either, especially on Fortified. You really want to make sure you use it here to help out your healer because the turbulence cast that these guys do is really painful. It's damage on the whole group. It usually spreads the group out because it's the pushback effect. So yeah, you want to use that there on Fortified for sure. Yeah, this boss fight is basically a tank and spank. You, as a tank, you really, there's like no way for you to die here unless you stand in absolutely everything like a dum-dum. Uh, Fun fact, if you sit here and just use, just keep moving to the right whenever orbs get near you, there is absolutely no way for you to get hit by any of the orbs. That's basically the pattern that they move in, is they always leave a little gap like you just saw me stand in. So if you keep just moving to the right like that, you just end up always having a spot to stand in and you don't have to worry about getting hit. Also, ideally, your group would rotate the kicks. This group was pretty good about kicking the boss, so we had no issues there. Here you saw me group up with the rest of the party. That was because I was close to proccing my After the Wildfire, which basically, if you don't know, it's every 200 rage you spend, you do a massive heal to up to 4 or to 5, basically to your party. It's a party thing. I think it heals 5 people near you, including yourself. But it will target, I believe, if there's 6 people, including yourself, it will heal the lowest people instead of you sometimes. And but yeah, the idea is it heals 5 people. And here I'm doing it again. I noticed that I only have 5 more rage I need to spend, so I'm trying to spend rage here to heal the group, and there we go. I got the big heal off. It wasn't necessary because Saggy Hooves XD is just absolutely blasting the HPS, and nobody was anywhere near dying, so it wasn't necessary, but it's a good habit to get into to make use of your After the Wildfire procs. For the Turbulent Squalls, I always pull both of these groups. Also a note, the first time you see a cast bar, it's always going to be just one cast bar. I've never seen more than one cast bar go off at the same time at the start. So this one, you'll see it's just the one cast bar. Nobody else is casting. So what I shouldn't have really used my knockback there. Now here you'll see multiple casts going off, and we used kicks on those. I think I'll use my incapacitating roar here. The group is just pelting them with so much CC. We also got the lunar beam or solar beam from the balanced druid in our group, Lunaruka. Here I'm kiting the mobs backwards a little bit by a little bit. I was also doing it at points in time where I had no reason to do it, which was probably not the best call, but you'll notice multiple times in this dungeon that I start backpedal kiting mobs that are nowhere near dying, and that's a bit of a mistake. Like, if there's no reason to move a mob, don't move a mob, so people can just sit there and beat the shit out of it. But yeah, it's a mistake of my own. I see that Icy Buffet is coming out, so I use my Nature's Vigil. You can see that it's on cooldown just freshly. You can get away with pulling these assassins because the way the hitbox of the dragon works is they really have to be either they completely disabled the dragon being affected by sanguine, or if the sanguine pool is like on the edge of its circle, it just won't heal because you see the circle's over the top of the sanguine thing, but the dragon isn't being healed by it. So you can get away with pulling these assassins with the dragon. Ideally, you don't unless you really trust your healer, and I definitely trust Saggy Hooves XD because I mean, with a name like that, who wouldn't trust them? But yeah, you can get away with pulling that. You don't have to worry too much about the sanguine pulls. Here I drop my thingy thing, my Ursol's Vortex. I think I'm going to knock back when I see multiple nasty casts. There I saw 2 Cyclone casts, so I just decided to knock everything back for the CC. I think in retrospect, I probably shouldn't use my knockback to CC enemies that are casting. I should just save it to make sure that things don't stand in sanguine, because that's a bit more important, because my group's helping a lot with the kicks and everything. So, but I guess if you have a group that doesn't kick as much as this group kicked, you should maybe consider using the Typhoon for interrupting casts. Here I'm trying to make sure that none of these go off. I use an incapacitating roar, but Elvax keeps beating me to it. And there we had a beautiful blinding light from Saggy Hoofs XD. I'm just going to keep saying their full name because it's just funny to me. But it interrupted one of the assassins casting its vapor form or whatever the heck it is. And here we have, I think, Saggy taunting off of me so that the sanguine pool goes to a different spot because the enemy was about to die. And that's a good call. Like the Saga keeps doing that, and you can tell that they're a high level player because they're kicking ass. They're doing really well with those taunts. Here I think the takeaway from this group is... Oh, the takeaway is that my headset will die if there's no sound coming through it. But the takeaway from this group is to basically keep backpedal kiting it. Ursol's Vortex is more of a curse than a blessing in these kinds of runs. You got to be real careful about how you use it. Here, it kind of cost me a bit of healing for the Sanguine, but it was only about like what 1 million or something from the Sanguine heal, so it's really not that big a deal that I used it there. But yeah. Here I get yoinked again by the Evoker. He carries me over, and I think I tell him to not use it on me, to use it to help the other classes that are slower than I am, because I have Mount form. Yeah, here I move into a safe spot, and then I think I type it here. Yeah, grab wheelchairs. You grab wheelchairs, not a class with Mount. Yeah, that's probably a bit passive aggressive and like unnecessarily rude, but I hate being moved around. Here I was getting a little bit worried because I was getting knocked up by the volcanic, but it turned out okay. Like it didn't keep me on the spot for long enough. I used my Kazara trinket to slam back into the ground and actually proc the damage effect. This is one of the rare times where I can actually utilize that. But yeah, for this boss fight, one tip that I can give is the wind comes from four directions, right? And you want to stand in such a way that the boss is in front of you and the wind source is behind you. You can do that even if you stand just a little bit to the side of where the boss is, like just a little past his halfway point. So you don't have to be right so that the wind is like right behind you. You can be right on the side of the wind as long as the boss is further away than the source is. So here you saw me stand. The wind was coming from my right, and now it's coming from my left. And the spot that I'm standing in, you can stay in that spot, and you can not move at all if the wind moves like from your right to your left, because there's a little bit of an intersection for every direction where you can stand and just reduce how many times you have to move around. Because every time you move, you risk moving the boss a little bit. If you move the boss a little bit, people can kind of run out of space to stand in to get the buff and also be in a position where they can get knocked up for the downburst. So yeah, that's just something to keep in mind. It's like a little optimization you can do that can help you reduce the amount of movement for this boss fight and let you mash the crap out of Raze. Speaking of which, I'm starting to love the Raze build. I used to keep saying that I don't like the build, but it's growing on me. Here I waited for everyone to drop down. That's why I have friendly health bars turned on, because I wanted to see 4 health bars before I use my uh, movement speed buff for the group. I dropped Ursol's Vortex because the Servant of Assad mobs, they will jump to a random target. And here you can see one of the Servant of Assad mobs. He tried to jump and then he got yoinked back. The other one jumped much later than my Vortex and didn't get yoinked back. Here I knock back the mobs because the Temple Adept was very low HP. So I wanted him to die further away from the rest of these enemies so that they don't stand in sanguine pools. One of the servants jumped back to a target that was behind one of the sanguine pools, so he kind of kept stood in it. This one was slowed by something, I'm not sure what by, so he stood in the sanguine pool as well, even though I was kiting. I think here I say mount form, hop on, or somebody to jump on, and nobody's really noticing what I mean, but Elvax figured it out. Yeah, people don't think of druids being able to carry them around anymore because they've changed that. Now you need to buy something from Moonglade to be able to do it. It used to be just built in, but now you have to buy something. Anyway, for this group, I try to keep the enemies close to the pyramid, so that way if a melee DPS gets targeted by, or a melee character in general, gets targeted by the lightning lash, we can still keep, they can still keep DPSing from inside the pyramid. I had a bit of a finicky maneuver there to make sure. Your top priority here, by the way, is to make sure that the Minister of Air does not have a sanguine pool underneath him at any point in time, like no matter what, because his casts are extremely long and uninterruptible, and you also can't move him. So you got to make sure that he doesn't get stuck with whatchamacallit, with sanguine underneath him, because he could heal the full, like he could stand there for the full duration of a pool and just heal himself the full if you let him. But yeah, if you skip one of the dragons, which is what we did, you have to kill literally every other enemy in the dungeon. So you'll see a lot of people try to skip these stars, like they'll try to run around the pillar or whatever. Just go and pull the stars. They don't know better than you. You're the tank. You know the route. I've been misled a few times, not a few times, once, about being able to skip those, and that's just not true. Here for this group, what I usually tend to do is I'll target the Executor of the Caliph because he is the top priority target. He does the AoE damage, the most damage. And I'll kick his rally because I can't interrupt him with CC. And I'll use my incapacitating roar to interrupt the heal casts of the other guys. And I just hope for the best that the rest of the group will actually interrupt the Holy Smite casts because they should, especially on Fortified, right? You want them to interrupt those casts because those things really hurt pretty bad. I charge the mob to make sure he doesn't go into the Sanguine pool. I move on to the next group. I think I use my Incarnation. I think I jump and use my Trinket, yeah, to get the buff for Crit and Leech. Here again, I'm targeting one of the Executors. I switched to the other one that was casting because I didn't want that cast to finish, and I just hoped that somebody would take care of the other one. And they did. It was Elvax. Elvax was on top of his game with the interrupts, and I absolutely love to see it. Here I'm struggling to keep everything away from the Minister of Air. So much so that I actually knocked back some of the enemies into a pool, but I'll take that sacrifice over healing him to full because he stands in a pool for like 78 seconds while he finishes his cast, so yeah. And now we're jumping down to the next stars. Here you can hop on my back usually, and I can protect you from fall damage, but a lot of people don't notice that, so the monk opted to take fall damage there. Usually I'll drop a Ursol's Vortex on top of as many stars as possible, and I'll Typhoon them. That way they all get pulled to the center of the Typhoon, or of the Vortex, and it lets somebody drop like a big AoE on top of their head, and they just instantly vanish. But I couldn't do that because my Typhoon was still on cooldown from kiting and sanguine stuff. And also the Evoker rooted everything, which is also a good call. That's a good call by them. So on the last boss, we pop Bloodlust, start just beating the bejesus out of him. On the last boss, the big thing as DPS specific, as a tank, it's like stay on top of the ad and don't die to the pyramid thing mechanic. That's your job as a tank. But as a DPS here, it's on top. It's on you to make sure that you save a defensive for the overlap of the orb and the chain lightning. So if you get targeted by chain lightning, what you want to do is, while the orb is up, by the way, if you get targeted by the chain lightning while the orb is up, you want to use a defensive. That's what you save your defensive for. If something happened to Roll God X, and I think that was the only death we had in the run, I think he derped out and he was like on the edge of the pyramid or something and just got zapped by the outside, which, you know, it happens. We're not going to judge you for being the only deaf in this otherwise flawless run. Um, but yeah, again, here's the Skyfall Nova is down and the orb is out at the same, and the chain lightning comes out at the same time. And hopefully Roll God X used a defensive cooldown there to help him survive. I think I also used my, what's it called? Nature's Vigil to try and help keep people as high HP as possible. That way Roll God X got targeted again there, so the boss is just bullying him, but it looked like he got some sort of external or he used a personal because he didn't go as low there. But anyway, I was using my Nature's Vigil during one of those overlaps to make sure that people are as high HP as possible so they don't get one-tapped by the chain lightning. Here I do a neat little technique, which is to switch out of bear form while he's drawing the pyramid and charge over, use wild charge over to a friendly character, so, or like a party member. That way you can stay close to the boss for as long as possible and keep beating the shit out of him, and keep your DPS up higher, and you can quickly get back to safety when you need to. Here, if the boss was any lower, I would have probably just stayed on the boss and killed him. I also made a mistake where I tried to use the Kazara trinket, but I hit Alt 3 instead of Alt 4, so I ended up turning into a stag, and then I also failed my jump, so that was just a shit show. And of course, I didn't get the trinket either. Anyway, this was Vortex Pinnacle 17 with Tyrannical, Volcanic, and Sanguine. Hopefully you enjoyed, hopefully you learned something, and back to live commentary, Vlad. That was a hell of a Vortex Pinnacle run, and it was also the 41st time I've been in that dungeon on this character.
It's ridiculous. I cannot get that trinket to drop. But I've been in there so many times that I've gotten a bunch of worm crests and a bunch of aspect crests from the dungeon. And what that means is I've actually hit 5 out of 5 on every single piece that I have, with the exception of the Mark of Dark Rule where I've hit 8 out of 8 because it's just not a hero piece. And of course, there's another exception, which is the Screaming Black piece of shit that I can't, that I'm trying to replace. It's not a bad trinket, by the way. Don't get me wrong. It is not a bad trinket. I just really want the Heart of Thunder, and I'm upset. But yeah, with all of those upgrades, we're now sitting at 439 item level, and that's more than enough to complete this series. Once I finally do get the trinket, I will probably hit 440, maybe even 441. I'm not sure, but probably just 440. We'll see. Speaking of getting the trinket, I am no longer going to show any Vortex Pinnacle runs until I actually get it, excluding the 20 key that I will do eventually on Vortex Pinnacle, because I will do a full narration of each of the 20 keys that I do. Maybe sometimes 2 in the same episode, just to keep everything nice and smooth, because there's going to be 16 runs, so I don't want to show 16 days of that footage. I don't want to drag it out too much. And speaking of which, in the next episode, I'll be doing my first 20 key. I will again be recording it without live commentary and then narrating over it later on. I think this is just the best call. I personally enjoy it a lot more because then I can focus on the gameplay, and later on I can add more info and just go more in depth into what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And I feel like there's just more information. The gameplay for me is more enjoyable. I don't know. I hope you guys enjoy it as well. I really, really like this change, and I think I'm going to stick to it. Yeah, let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next episode.